Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 62 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we are going to talk about some Dynasty sell candidates. So players that I think are worth trading away at this point in the offseason that I think you can get either some good value for or players that you can make a profit on before they fall off a cliff with their fantasy production. So I have 10 players that I want to talk about today. And before we do that, I want to make sure that everyone is following this podcast on your platform of choice, whether you're a Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, whatever your go-to podcast platform is, we are there. So make sure you're following the show so you don't miss any future episodes. Find us on social media as well. We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube. You can find me on Blue Sky at Andrew Vcourt. So we're out there on a bunch of different platforms. So go follow along there as well. Before jumping into the rest of today's show, I want to tell you about a new partnership that this podcast has with Fast Draft. Now, Fast Draft is a new partnership that we have that is a platform for best ball drafts. So it's a quick, fun way to draft, takes the grind out of fantasy football, and Fast Draft is giving away over $250,000 in prizes this year, with all rookie tournaments, all flex tournaments, and even all defense tournaments if you're looking for something new. The drafts are 20 seconds per pick. They wrap up in just 5 minutes, so you can get those drafts in at any point during your day. Sign up with code WARROOM, and Fast Draft will double your first deposit up to $50. That's right. Just use code WARROOM to double your first deposit and rip a fantasy draft while waiting in line to pick up your kid on your lunch break or wherever your day takes you. One more time, that is code WARROOM on the app Fast Draft to double your first deposit up to $50. All right, so let's jump on into today's show and talk some sell candidates. And as always, I'm going to break down some names at each of the 4 positions. And we're going to start with quarterbacks, as we typically do. And I have 2 names. I don't know that there are as many obvious sell candidates either at the quarterback position or across the board compared to last offseason. I think the market is actually in a pretty stable place right now. I don't have too many major complaints, but I do have a handful of names that I think, based on where they currently are ranked, are nice trade-away players. And the first name is going to be a big one, and that is Patrick Mahomes, quarterback, Kansas City Chiefs. Based on Keep Trade Cut's current Dynasty trade rankings, or just overall rankings for Dynasty. If you're not familiar with Keep Trade Cut, it's kind of it's a community-based, they let users rank the players based on a Keep Trade Cut, and it helps generate these overall rankings. And so Patrick Mahomes is quarterback 6 on those rankings, which to me is a little bit high. I certainly understand it. You know, it's Patrick Mahomes. He's the face of the league. The Chiefs have been one of the best teams in the league for years now since he took over as the starter. And while Patrick Mahomes certainly at one point in time was worth the 101 in a Superflex Dynasty startup draft and was the number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy football, I don't think he's that player anymore. I think he has evolved. I think the team has evolved a bit. Ever since the offensive coordinator change happened 2 years ago, Matt Nagy returned to the team, Eric Bieniemy moved on. The offense has not been as good, certainly nowhere near as good for fantasy. We've seen that both for the receivers, quarterbacks. The one spot where the team has had a little boost is the rushing yards. They've been more of a run-heavy offense, but that hasn't been helpful for Mahomes' fantasy value. So he is a huge name. He's a proven producer, and he's obviously going to have that job for as long as he wishes to play football. So this isn't a scenario where you can, or where I would not necessarily trade him away for only picks. I think you want to get some more certainty with this because there is something to be had with the safety of a player like Mahomes, where you know for the next 5 to 10 years you have a locked-in quarterback that can be in the top 12 every year. But last 2 seasons, QB 11, QB 8, which is good, but it's not elite. It's not QB 6 overall in Dynasty elite. He's about to hit his 30s, and we talked about the offensive changes. Travis Kelce has declined a bit, and so I would prefer to do one of two things. I would either tier up to Josh Allen or Jaden Daniels, by trading Mahomes and another piece, whether it be a draft pick or another player. But that's option one. Option two would be to tier down, which is a really good way to accumulate some value, especially if your team has Mahomes, but you're a little bit thin on depth. I think tiering down to a Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud by acquiring another first-round pick or another starter for your lineup, whatever, the managers in your league see fit to do. I think you can get something done there. It might be tough to get a first with somebody like Herbert, but I think Stroud, or certainly one of the young players like a Caleb Williams, a Drake May, someone that's in that tier below Mahomes right now, I think you can get another solid asset to move on from Patrick Mahomes, because he does still have that huge name. He certainly is still going to be a valuable asset for a roster. I just don't know that he is going to be the number one overall quarterback ever again. I don't know that he's necessarily even going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback. I think he might be just solidly in that 6 to 12 range. And that's good. It's really good. It's consistent. You like that. But if you want to, aim for the ceiling and get someone that has a little bit more of a rushing floor in an Allen or a Daniels or even a Lamar Jackson, and pick up somebody that can help your starting lineup or give you someone else to look for in the draft with a first-round pick or a collection of later picks, whatever it is you want to do. I think there's something that can be done with Mahomes, and now seems like a good time to move on. It doesn't seem like the offense is going to be changing back to more of a pass-focused attack. And so while I admit it's going to be a tough thing to do because you probably drafted him with, a top 2 or 3 pick overall in your startup draft, I just think now could be a good time to move on from Mahomes. The other quarterback that I want to bring up today is a bit lower on the list in terms of rankings, and that's Sam Darnold, a new Seattle Seahawks quarterback. He's listed on Keep Trade Cut at QB 25, and last year I think was his ceiling. He was QB9. He was awesome. He made the Pro Bowl. It was an unbelievable season with elite weapons, a great offensive coach, and I just don't see that ever happening again. Now, his price certainly does not reflect the idea that he's going to be a QB9 year in, year out. I think the expectation is that he's going to be a QB2 moving forward, somewhere probably in that 12 to 18 range, and I think that's fine. He is a capable player for another season if you can get him on the cheap, or your team has other quarterbacks that you can rely on if you want to kind of play the matchup game with Sam Darnold. But I don't know that I want to count on him as a week-to-week starter just automatically in my lineup. I think he's someone I would much rather have as a QB3 in a Superflex league. And the contract, while the dollar amount is pretty solid, it gives the Seattle Seahawks the chance to move on from Sam Darnold after one season. And seeing how he turned into a pumpkin, at midnight at the end of the season last year with the blitz, and he really, really, really struggled in those big games against the Lions and then, of course, in the playoffs. I am fearful that he is simply going to be a one-year wonder, and if you can get a first-round pick for him right now, I think I would do it. I would do that for sure. If you can exchange him for another similarly tiered quarterback and get another asset, I think that's a good way to go. I'm just not a long-term believer in Sam Darnold. So if you're someone that is, you just want the depth for one season and you want to take the chance that he's good enough to get years 2 and 3 on that contract, be my guest. I just don't have that long-term belief that he is going to remain Seattle's starter. They did draft Jalen Milroe, who I'm not terribly worried about because he can't throw the football, but it shows that the team is taking the position at, I'm not sure what the right word would be, but they're not just sticking with Darnold and riding it out one way or another. They are planning for all outcomes here by taking Milroe to develop him, potentially as someone who could take over the backfield next year. Although I view that's unlikely as well. I think we'll probably have an entirely new quarterback room in terms of a starter in a couple seasons for Seattle. But it's something that I'm just not willing to get involved in this. Sam Darnold is not a player that I want to just keep on a roster. I think that given the hype from last year, especially if you have players in your league that are not just super dialed into the ins and outs of player contracts and they just see, QB9, he must be good, that kind of thing. Some other casual dynasty players. I think that those are good managers to target with a Sam Darnold trade just because, the possibility is certainly there that he falls off a cliff and you're left holding the bag with Sam Darnold. All right, so moving on to running back, and James Cook is the first name I want to talk about. Running back 13 on Keep Trade Cut was awesome last year, and we talked about the idea of if you want that guy for one season a bit with Sam Darnold, then James Cook falls into a bit of a similar bucket to me of, I think this year he will be largely fine. I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff and be some unusable player. I think he's a good running back in a great situation in Buffalo. But this is more of a long-term sell, and now could be the time to maximize your value. At RB13, you're going to be able to get at least a first-round pick, probably more, and he's in a contract dispute with Buffalo right now. It doesn't seem like Buffalo has any interest in paying him the money he wants. We could see some sort of hold-in situation. It's rare that we see players actually sit out nowadays, but anything's possible. I think that there's a pretty good chance that James Cook is playing for another team next year, although I was surprised that Buffalo did not draft a running back in this draft class, but he would drop in value in my eyes if he goes somewhere else. I think Buffalo is the best spot for him, so I am a bit concerned about the contract situation and the idea that Buffalo doesn't seem all that interested in giving him an extension right now. So that could certainly change. If he gets the contract extension at some point in the offseason, I would probably remove him from this list. But at this point in time, I don't know that the general population of fantasy managers are all that dialed into the James Cook contract situation, but it's something to take a look at, read up on it a bit if you are a manager, and just decide how you feel from a risk management standpoint of, all right, if I'm a contender, am I just going to hold on to him this year, ride it out, and whatever happens next year happens, then fine. Just know that you're okay with that. If you are maybe a middle-of-the-pack team or a rebuilding team, certainly, or someone that is not necessarily in a great position to contend for a title this year, it might be a good time to move on, and that's why he's on this list. He is not a player that gets a full workload of snaps. He's not a 3-down running back. He maxed out last year at 61% of snaps, and that was in week 1. He never touched 60% of snaps the rest of the season, so that's something that is concerning, although he obviously still was very efficient and scored a lot of fantasy points. He would be a lot better if he was getting 80, 90% of snaps, like more of the true workhorse backs get. And he should still be solid this year and very motivated, which is why, again, a little bit more of a long-term sell. But the other thing here to pay attention to is touchdowns. Last year, James Cook scored 16 touchdowns on the ground, which incredible season. I mean, for a smaller running back that is not necessarily thought of as some power running back, more of a elusive, change of pace, that type of guy, he went from 2 touchdowns to 16, which is an insane jump. I don't think that's going to happen again. Could he get 10? Sure. But if he's pushing 15, 16 touchdowns, I will be very surprised if that were to be the case. And touchdown numbers fluctuate a ton. Now, Buffalo's going to be a very good team, very good offense. And so could he score double-digit or 15 touchdowns again? Sure, he absolutely could. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying that the odds of him doing it again, probably not very high. I think he's probably more in the 8 to 12 range, which still very good, but If he does not see an increase in his snaps or the workload, that's going to drop his fantasy production, just losing those, 6 touchdowns or so. So I'm a little bit worried about that. And between that and the contract, he's a player that I'm certainly not trading for. And depending on your team situation, I would be looking to move on, especially because I think the running back market now got a bit stronger following the rookies coming into the league. So if you can use James Cook to move around for whether it be someone like Chase Brown or Josh Jacobs, who I think are both in the same tier, probably just below James Cook. So I think you could get another asset with those players. If you wanted to go down even further, but still maintain some high-level production, I think moving somebody like James Cook for a Derrick Henry, a Christian McCaffrey, and getting another player or pick along with that could make a lot of sense. And that could be your way out as a contender because you keep that production, but you pick up something else, and you can just ride out one of those other veterans who are, I think, actually pretty good buy candidates in guys like CMC and Derrick Henry, especially Henry given the contract extension. But with their age, they're not going for the price that someone like James Cook is going for because he's still in his prime. So you have some different ways to maneuver the market with James Cook if you're looking to move on. The second running back to talk about on today's show is going to be Isaiah Pacheco from the Kansas City Chiefs. So 2 Kansas City players make the list, and Pacheco is running back 29, which is fine. I don't really have an issue necessarily with where he's being valued. My issue with Pacheco is I think he's probably going to fall off a cliff by the end of the season. I would be surprised if he remains the starter all year long. He did get very lucky in the NFL draft. There was no high-level running back taken by the Chiefs. They did take Rashad Smith in the 7th round, who I think is a very nice sleeper candidate, because Pacheco was a 7th-round pick himself. So Smith, being the same, could cut into that workload. They won't be afraid to get him into the mix if he's deserving of that. So a worthwhile dart throw there if you're looking for a very late-round running back target. But Isaiah Pacheco, he got lucky once already, but Kareem Hunt is still there. I think he could factor into this backfield. It's probably going to be a big, messy committee. I don't know that Isaiah Pacheco is going to be the workhorse ever again. It just doesn't seem like that type of scenario there in Kansas City. It's not what the Chiefs really want to do. And there's not a lot of investment in Pacheco either because we talked about the 7th-round pick, and they could move on from him next year easily without losing any amount of big money or anything like that. This is not a situation where Pacheco has shown he's important enough to have the team base the offense around him or have to extend him early or anything like that. So if you can still get some solid pieces for Isaiah Pacheco, I think I would move him. Regardless of your status as a contender or a rebuilder, I would be trying to move on. It was tough before the draft because everyone thought Kansas City was going to take a running back in the 2nd or 3rd round. They did not do that. So I think there is now still a window available for you to move Isaiah Pacheco if you can find someone willing to bite. RB29, it's one of those kind of in-between values where you're going to get something of decent quality. You might not be able to necessarily get a big upgrade on the position. However, I think there are a lot of different ways that you can go that would land you a player with a bit less risk and whether it be rookies or another player similarly in this tier. So, for example, DeAndre Swift, I believe, is RB30 on Keep Trade Cut. So they're back-to-back, Pacheco and Swift. I would much rather have DeAndre Swift. That's even with the possibility of Nick Chubb signing in Chicago. I just think that Swift, post-draft, is going to be involved in this offense at a minimum as a number 2 in a pass-catching role, whereas Pacheco, I think he could lose his job, whether it's as the 1 or the B, or, the 1A, 1B situation with Kareem Hunt. I think he could lose that spot altogether and just fall out of favor, be more of a 3rd running back on the roster, that sort of thing. So Isaiah Pacheco, a guy that I'm out on at this time. All right, so wide receivers. Wide receivers are the core part of every Dynasty team. It's what helps you maintain a contending roster for a long time, of course, with quarterbacks. But I do have 4 names here at wide receiver, so a little bit more on this list compared to the other positions in terms of guys that I would be looking to trade away or at least to capitalize on the value. And so we're going to go a little bit out of order in terms of rankings, but we're going to start with a big name in DK Metcalf, Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, currently wide receiver 24 on Keep Trade Cut. And obviously, Metcalf, well-known player, been around a long time, very productive player in Seattle. And he's going to a new situation with the Pittsburgh Steelers where he's going to have worse quarterback play, whether it is Mason Rudolph or Aaron Rodgers or Will Howard, whatever it is, it's not going to be great. It's a run-heavy offense. Arthur Smith is there as the OC, which is, not the name you want to see if you are someone that likes, a high-powered offense for fantasy purposes. Arthur Smith offenses are typically where wide receiver ones go to die, or just wide receivers in general go to die. I mean, A.J. Brown with him in Tennessee was solid, but never spectacular until he got traded to the Eagles. Or he could have at least been better. The efficiency numbers were good for him in Tennessee, but if he was on a better passing attack, just a better offense overall, we could have seen insane numbers out of A.J. Brown in Tennessee. Drake London in Atlanta struggled his first couple years to really take hold in that offense. It wasn't until Arthur Smith left that Drake London finally broke out and had a really nice year for fantasy. So you kind of get the feeling here. DK Metcalf, he signed a nice, huge contract with Pittsburgh, so he's going to be around a while. He's going to have some value for an extended period of time. But I think now is a good time to trade him because George Pickens getting traded, I think it ultimately is going to help DK Metcalf both on the field and with his fantasy value. Less competition. I don't think this offense was going to be able to support 2 wide receivers, but now there is some extra hype in the market with DK Metcalf, which I think means you can get more for him in a trade. I think you can probably still get a first-round pick. I think you can probably still get multiple assets to help your team, especially if it's in a tier-down situation. So one of my favorite things to do with players that I'm not a huge fan of is trying to tier down by moving down a few spots in the rankings, but then picking up a first or second round pick to go with that player. I think it's a really good way to accumulate value in Dynasty. And so there's a handful of players that are below him in the rankings, whether it's a couple spots or 10 spots. The 3 names that come to mind are DJ Moore, Chris Olave, and Jalen Waddle. All 3 of those players are currently ranked below DK Metcalf, and I would probably rather have all 3 straight up compared to DK. So if you can get a second-round pick plus Chris Olave for DK Metcalf or something similar to that scenario, I would be all about it. DJ Moore, a little bit closer in age there. A lot of unknowns with Chicago, right? I think DJ Moore is a player that a lot of people are trying to trade, and you can capitalize on that because from a production standpoint for this year, I don't know that DK Metcalf, and DJ Moore are going to be all that different. I'd probably expect Moore to be the better fantasy wide receiver in 2025. And so I think you can get better production for 2025 from all 3 of these players that I mentioned, Moore, Olave, and Waddle, but then also pick up another pick or a depth piece somewhere else to help your team for DK Metcalf. So he's the first wide receiver on this list that I'm looking to move on from. Number 2 is going to be Green Bay Packers wide receiver Jaden Reed. So he's currently wide receiver 40 on Keep Trade Cut, which is not all that bad. This isn't necessarily a player that I hate the valuation right now at wide receiver 40. I think it's fair, but he's just not a player that I really want to have on my team. And I think while he still has pretty solid value, I'd be looking to trade him. I don't think you're going to be able to get a first for him. You can certainly try, but you can get some other pieces, similar players, again, package up for some depth. But the Packers took Matthew Golden in the first round. Jaden Reed is not a full-time starter. He's really more of the third receiver in the offense, despite being kind of thought of as the fantasy number one on the team. He's never had 80%, or I shouldn't say never. Last season, did not have 80% of snaps in any games. He only had 75% plus twice. He cracked 70% a handful of times, but for the most part, this is a 50 to 60, somewhere in the 50 to 70% range in terms of snaps on the field as a wide receiver, which is fine when you're a very efficient player, which Reed is, but it's never going to be enough to make him a true elite wide receiver and number one option, someone that you can count on as a top 20 option, even a top 24 wide receiver. I just think he's probably more stuck as a wide receiver 3 at best. And given that, and the variation in snaps, he's a very inconsistent player for fantasy. I think we all probably remember last year we had the huge week 1, but then it was tough to start him after that. And I think that's going to be the big problem you have with Jayden Reed is when can you put him in your lineup? Having him in there every single week is not going to feel great because he's going to hurt you a lot of the time. Now, the weeks that he pops off, you're going to feel great, but it's not going to be consistent. He's going to drive you nuts. And with the added competition, I would be moving on from Jayden Reed and trying to spin him into something else. Now, my final 2 wide receivers are going to actually be 2 bigger names, 2 players that are higher up the list than even DK Metcalf. And so I'm going to start with Rome Odunze, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears, wide receiver 20 on Keep Trade Cut. And Rome Odunze to me he's one of the most difficult players to project right now in fantasy football across the board, regardless of position. He is currently being ranked in the same tier on Keep Trade Cut as guys like Rashee Rice, Devonta Smith. You can get a ton for him in a trade, given his number 20 wide receiver ranking. And it's tough with Odunze because you have to recognize that there is a wide range of outcomes. He could be awesome. He could absolutely live up to his top 10 hype, be a stud wide receiver 1 on this team if they were to move on from DJ Moore, or he ends up being Ben Johnson's wide receiver of choice in the offense. Certainly could be the case. But you also could see a situation where he just ends up as a solid number 2, and he's a, borderline wide receiver 2, 3, somewhere in the 20s for fantasy. And if he's the wide receiver 24 just on a consistent basis moving forward, it's going to mean he's better for probably the Bears in real life than he will be for fantasy. And he certainly is not going to live up to a wide receiver 20 price tag. And that to me is kind of the median outcome here. And then there's also the downside, which is they just drafted Colson Loveland, Luther Burden, and they have DJ Moore. So what happens if Ben Johnson is not as in love with Rome Odunze as the previous coaching staff? You could end up with a scenario where he just falls out of favor and never breaks out into being an elite fantasy asset at all, and is not even a player that gives you a wide receiver 2 or 3 season, and just looks more of like what he was last year, where 700 yards, 800 yards, a decent player, but never truly helps you in fantasy. So a lot of different options here. And I think that depending on your team situation, that's going to help you figure out what the best thing is to do with Rome Odunze. I have him in 1 league, and I have been on the fence about, do I just hold him? Do I try to use him in a trade? And it's a tough decision. So I get it. If you have Rome Odunze and you want to just hope that your pick pays off, I certainly understand it. But if you are someone that does like to wheel and deal, or you are very worried about the Bears situation with all these new players, new coaching staff, I would much rather have Rashee Rice than Rome Odunze. So if you can trade Odunze for Rice, either straight up or get another piece thrown in, because the guy that has Rashee Rice could still be worried about injury or suspension, that sort of thing. Rome Odunze is still a big name, was obviously a mid-first round pick last year, so there's a lot of hype with Rome Odunze. So I think you can get a really nice haul for him, depending on your league situation. So that's kind of what you have to weigh is, okay, if I were to trade him, can I get a wide receiver I like better? Can I attach a second-round pick and go up and get an elite wide receiver? And those are the types of conversations that you have to have with yourself about what you want to do moving forward. I don't have a great take on where he's going to be value-wise next season, but I will say that he had a mediocre rookie season and his value hardly dropped in Dynasty, and that is difficult to kind of rationalize here because the situation is not all that different from a year ago. Obviously no Keenan Allen, but again, we added Luther Burden, we added Colson Loveland, and so situation might be marginally better without Keenan Allen. I think he's probably locked in as a starting receiver on the outside, but I'm a little skeptical. It's a really difficult spot to be, and if you can upgrade into a player that you're more confident in, I think that would be a good spot to make a pivot. And the final player at wide receiver is going to be A.J. Brown, wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, and probably the biggest name outside of Patrick Mahomes on this list today. And he's wide receiver 14 and keep trade cut, so still right at the 1-2 turn, essentially, in terms of wide receiver value at the position. And he turns 28 years old this summer, so he's still in his prime, but he is starting to approach the age where a fall off could happen, and you're still in the window where you can get an elite return for him if you want to cash out. So missed a couple games due to injury last year, still a solid, he was wide receiver 2 overall in fantasy last year. I believe he was 18th, I think 18th or 19th off the top of my head. And so that's a really solid middle of the pack wide receiver 2 overall, somewhere in that 12 to 24 range. And I think that's probably where he's going to be again this year, probably on the higher end, assuming he doesn't miss any time. But there are other young players that are ranked right around him that I would rather have. I'd rather have Ladd McConkey. I would rather have JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. And so either of those two players, if you can do a 1-for-1, I think that A.J. Brown still carries a big enough name that you might be able to get more for him than his value truly is. So even though I think McConkey is ranked ahead of A.J. Brown on keep trade cut, I think to a lot of managers, that's going to feel like a weird trade to make. And so I think you could get away with tacking on a pick or another player to a McConkey for an A.J. Brown just because we've thought of A.J. Brown as this, top 7, top 8 dynasty wide receiver for so long. So feel it out, but I think this is a player that, given his play style and his size, is probably not going to age all that gracefully for the NFL. I still think he certainly has at least 1 or 2 good seasons left in the NFL as a top elite wide receiver, but it could be, this is not necessarily a player where I'm looking to just hold him until he retires. There are some players that are just so good, you're just going to keep them forever. And, when they fall off, they fall off. Travis Kelce might be one of those guys. Justin Jefferson's one of those guys. Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey could be those types of players. But A.J. Brown, I don't think quite falls into that category. So if you're looking to cash out before the fall off happens, I think now is probably the time to do it because I still think you could get a huge haul for him. Last year, I traded him at the very beginning of the season in a league where I was rebuilding, and I got 2 first-round picks and 2 first-round picks and Christian Watson in a trade. And so I think you can, I don't know if you're going to be able to get quite that much this time around, but I still think that you are in a window where you can get a first plus another good asset, whether it's a player or a pick. So a lot of different options. And A.J. Brown is just a player that I'm a little bit worried about that age cliff, and I'm looking to move on from him if it makes sense for that team. I'm not just blatantly looking to move on no matter what, but he certainly is someone that I would like to upgrade from if possible, or you can get a nice tier down. So there's a lot of younger players. Maybe you're into Ted McMillan, Travis Hunter, somebody in that range. You can get an extra pick on top of those names for an A.J. Brown. So lots of different routes to go moving on from A.J. Brown. And at tight end, I got 2 names. So first is going to be tight end number 10 on Keep Trade Cut, Isaiah Likely for the Baltimore Ravens. And this is a weird one to me because it's not that I don't like Isaiah Likely. I just think it's crazy that he is a top 10 tight end when he still does not have a starting job. He is priced 3 spots ahead of Mark Andrews, who is tight end 13. But Mark Andrews is still on the team. There's been a lot of speculation that he's going to be cut or traded or something along those lines, moved off to another team. But that hasn't happened yet. I would be stunned if they actually cut Mark Andrews. I think it's more of a trade possibility. But I just don't think that Mark Andrews has reached the point where he is not a player that Baltimore would want around. And so until a move happens, tight end 10 is far too pricey for me for Isaiah Likely. I would much rather have Tucker Kraft, who is 1 spot below him at tight end 11. And so if you can trade him for a player that's kind of in a similar tier to him, whether it's a Kraft or Kyle Pitts is somebody that I would still prefer. Dalton Kincaid, I think, is right in that range. I would prefer all of those names to Isaiah Likely. And so you can make that trade, or if you want to go out and get Mark Andrews in a second. If the market truly has Mark Andrews several spots below Isaiah Likely, I would still rather have Andrews until something happens. So maybe this is a situation where if you have him on your team, you might hold out because his value could increase. But I'm not buying Isaiah Likely at tight end 10 prices. And if you are someone that needs a starter or a number 2 that is going to be able to start for you, I don't think you can count on Isaiah Likely. And given that his price tag already is seeming to factor in a Mark Andrews move, I think you can go out and get a pretty good name to replace him on your roster. And finally, the last player in today's episode of a sell candidate is going to be Cade Otton, tight end number 20 overall at the position from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Cade Otton is somebody that it's a little bit tough to put him on this list because tight end 20 is not exactly expensive. But at the same time, I think he's a name that people recognize from last year from having just a monster middle of the season. He had some huge games last year, but they were all with Evans and Godwin out due to injury. And that was really before Jalen McMillan had established himself as a solid receiver. So now Evans and Godwin are back. They drafted Egbuka. McMillan is established. So there's a lot of different names here that you probably are going to go to if you're Baker Mayfield before you get to Cade Otton. And while Cade Otton should still be a fine safety valve backup option, your tight end 3 or 4, I think he is very replaceable. I think that it's not going to be that difficult for you to find someone that you can plug in on bye weeks. And I don't know that he's ever going to rise back up into being someone that you can start on a weekly basis. I think that was just kind of a, hey, if you have him, take advantage of it for that 4-week span while you could in 2024. So if you can find someone that maybe remembers that, or in a trade, you can point to that and say, look, this is a full-time starter. He plays every snap. He's shown he can do it. And he's got some upside because, hey, look, he did it last year. You might be able to pull off a trade to get a different asset at another position, maybe even move up for another tight end. But I think he's replaceable, and that's really the big thing is you're going to be able to find some other options to fill in for 1 or 2 weeks if you need to. And Cade Otton is somebody that I think is a little bit overhyped. He's not an elite athlete. I think he's there, he's reliable, he's safe. But he's not somebody that is going to do a whole lot for your dynasty team. All right. So there you have it. Those are our 10 sell candidates for May of 2025. And, so let me know on social media if you're able to pull off any trades involving these players. Definitely some big names involved. whether it's Mahomes or James Cook or DK, AJ Brown, Romo Dunze. So a lot of big trade away players here in today's show. So, and of course, before we sign off, I want to remind everyone now that we have this partnership with Fast Draft, go use my code WARROOM. You can double your first deposit. If you're in Michigan, unfortunately, it's not available yet here in Michigan, but hopefully soon. And it's in 35 other states. So if you're listening from anywhere else in the country or around the world, you can go ahead and use that code to get double your first deposit up to $50. And you can enjoy some quick fantasy football drafts, or fast drafts, as I should say. So thank you all for tuning in. This is the Dynasty War Room podcast. My name is Andrew Valancourt, and we will talk to you all next week.